On the night of my 70th birthday, our penthouse in Boston's Back Bay was filled to capacity. From our windows, the Charles River was a dark ribbon of glass, reflecting the city lights. The room was buzzing, filled with the people who mattered in our world, Harvard deans, surgeons from Mass General, and biotech investors with sharp eyes and even sharper suits. I was the hostess, Jacqueline Manning, and the guest of honor. But I'd lived in this world for 45 years. I knew the truth. They were here for me, or so the invitation said, but in our world, they were always really there for Barry. I saw it all night. Old friends and new acquaintances would come to me, kiss my cheek, and say, "Jacqueline, you look marvelous." 70, I can't believe it. They'd smile, but their eyes would already be scanning over my shoulder, looking for him. Then they'd turn, their faces brightening. "Barry, just the man I wanted to see." I didn't mind. Or rather, I'd taught myself not to mind. I would just smooth the silk of my dress, check on the catering, and keep smiling. My son, Peter, caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, concerned smile. He knew. He was the only one who really saw the whole picture. I just gave him a tiny nod that said, "I'm fine, darling. Just watch." Then, at precisely 9 o'clock, Barry stepped into the center of the room and tapped his crystal glass. That familiar tink-tink-tink. The room fell silent. Just like that. He had that power. He was 72, tall, with a full head of silver hair, and a smile that had opened every door in this city. "Friends, colleagues, family," he began, his voice warm and commanding. He put one arm around my waist, pulling me into his side. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate my wonderful wife, Jacqueline, on her 70th birthday." Polite applause. He kissed my temple. I smiled. My smile was an armor I had perfected over 45 years. "A milestone like this, it makes a man reflect," he continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "It makes him think about the life we've built. The legacy." He paused, and his voice took on that humble, heartfelt tone he used when he was about to praise himself. "When I founded Manning Medical," he said, "I felt that tiny, familiar pinch. I founded, not we. But I just kept smiling. I had a vision," he boomed. "A simple idea, to change the way we diagnose disease. To give doctors the tools they needed before it was too late. And today, I look at what his innovations, his words, have done, and I am humbled." He went on for 10 minutes, talking about his company, his vision, his breakthroughs. He talked about the sacrifices he had made. The guests nodded, captivated. This was the story they all knew. Barry Manning, the brilliant innovator, and Jacqueline, his quiet, supportive wife. His rock. "But a man is nothing without his rock," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "And Jacqueline, she has been my rock, standing by me, running our home, allowing me the space to create." I almost laughed, allowing him the space. I, who had spent 10,000 nights in the lab while he was out networking, which was just another word for drinking expensive scotch with investors. But I just smiled. "But tonight isn't just about the past," Barry said, his voice dropping dramatically. "It's about the future. Manning Medical is my life's work, and finding someone to carry that torch, it was a task I did not take lightly. I held my breath, but I wasn't nervous. I was just waiting. Legacy, you see, isn't just about what you build. It's about who carries it on. And I have found that person." He turned and scanned the crowd. "There is a woman here tonight, a person of incredible talent, vision, and the kind of ambition that reminds me well of myself." He smiled. "Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lena Reed." He gestured to the edge of the room. A woman in her late 30s, sharp and severe in a dark pantsuit, stepped forward. She practically vibrated with energy. I'd seen her around the office, always at Barry's side, always watching. A wave of shocked silence rippled through the room, followed by a scattered, confused applause. Lena Reed. She was a senior manager, not an executive. Barry put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her to his other side. We were a trio. The brilliant man, his aging wife, and the new, bright future. I am thrilled to announce, Barry said, his voice full of paternal pride, that as of next month, Dr. Reed will be taking over as the new CEO of Manning Medical. He presented her like a prize. He was passing his life's work, my life's work, to her, in front of everyone. On my birthday, I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't faint. I just smiled. As the polite, stunned applause died down, I gently removed Barry's arm from my waist. I held up a hand, just a small gesture. The room went quiet again. Barry looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. I was off script. Jacqueline, he whispered. I didn't answer him. I walked, not quickly, but steadily to the antique side table by the window. On it, there was a single, elegant box wrapped in dark blue paper. No bow, just clean, simple, and final. I picked it up. I walked back to him. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in people's glasses. I held the box out to my husband. Barry, I said, my voice didn't tremble. It was clear as the winter air outside. I knew, this gift is for you. He laughed. A short, nervous sound. Jacqueline, darling, you shouldn't have. It's your birthday. He probably thought it was a watch. Or cufflinks. Another prop for the great man. He took the box from me. Well, thank you. He pulled the paper off. Underneath was a plain, white cardboard box. He lifted the lid, and he looked inside. I watched his face. All the color, all that famous charisma, just drained away. His smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of pale, raw confusion. His hands, the ones that had gestured so confidently just moments before, began to tremble. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and blank. He tried to speak. Jack, what is this? The guests were frozen, watching. Dr. Reed's ambitious smile faltered. She knew, in that instant, that something was terribly wrong. I just looked at him, looked right through the man I'd been married to for 45 years. Happy birthday, Barry. I said, the gift is a fresh start. That morning, my 70th birthday, I was up at 5 a.m., just as I am every morning. Barry was still asleep in our room down the hall, breathing the deep, satisfied sleep of a man who believes the world revolves around him. Our penthouse was quiet, and the first gray light of dawn was just touching the Charles River. I made my coffee, strong and black, and went to my real office, not the grand mahogany library where Barry took his important calls, but a small, bright room filled with bookshelves, a high-powered computer, and white boards covered in my own handwriting. This is the part of the story no one knows. The part that wasn't in the glossy magazine profiles about Barry Manning. I'm not just a supportive wife. My name is Dr. Jacqueline Manning. I have a PhD in biochemistry from MIT, and for 45 years, I have been the chief researcher, the lead developer, and the silent, uncredited engine of Manning Medical. As I sat at my desk, looking at the raw data from our latest clinical trial, I thought about the party we were having that night. I thought about the performance that was expected of me, to smile, to be the gracious hostess, to be the rock while my husband took his bows. But as I sighed my coffee, I was just calm. I had known this day was coming. Not the party, but the end. It took me back. 30 years ago, Manning Medical wasn't a glittering billion-dollar corporation. It was just a concept, a file on a university computer, a thing I called Project J4. I was a researcher then, working late nights in a university lab. I had stumbled onto something, Not a new drug, but a new way of seeing. It was a diagnostic algorithm, a piece of software that could analyze a single drop of blood and spot the faint, invisible markers for degenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, years, even a decade before a single physical symptom appeared. It was my life's work. It was, I knew, a revolution. And then there was Barry. Barry was magnetic. He was in the business school, and he had that easy, confident charm that I, as a woman who preferred labs to parties, had never understood. He didn't understand the science, not the deep, cellular mechanics of it, but he understood power. He understood money. He understood how to make people believe. He found out about my research, and his eyes lit up, not with the wonder of the discovery, but with the potential. I remember the night he made his pitch. We were at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. He leaned across the table, his voice low and passionate. "Jacqueline, darling, you're a genius," he said. "You're a true artist, a scientist. You're too brilliant for boardrooms. You shouldn't be wasting your mind on spreadsheets, on investor calls, on lawyers." He took my hand. "Let me handle that. Let me be your shield. Let me build the frame so you can paint the masterpiece. You stay in the lab where you belong. Let me go out and tell the world." I was tired. I was a researcher, not a salesperson. I hated asking for grant money, and he was so convincing. He made it sound like a partnership. He made it sound like he was protecting me. I almost agreed. I was ready to just hand it all over. But then, that weekend, I went to have Sunday dinner with my father. My father was a practical man. He'd come to this country with nothing and built a small, successful tool and die business. He was a man of steel and numbers and things he could hold in his hand. He had no patience for charm. He'd seen men like Barry his whole life. I told him about my discovery. His eyes lit up just as Barry's had, but for a different reason. He saw the work. Then I told him about Barry's offer to handle the business. My father put down his fork and looked at me. His face was unreadable. "Jacqueline," he said, his voice quiet, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. Charm is cheap. Genius is rare." He leaned forward. "That man, he wants to put his name on your work. And when a man puts his name on a woman's work, he eventually, in his own mind, convinces himself he did it. He will get the applause, and you will get the privilege of supporting him." That line hit me like a splash of cold water. "You will not do it," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. "Tomorrow you will go to a lawyer. My lawyer. You will form a corporation. You will be the sole proprietor. The patents, every single one, from this first algorithm to whatever comes next, will be filed in your name and your name alone." "But Dad," I started, "he wants to be CEO." "Let him," my father said, waving his hand. "He can be the president. He can be the King of England. For all I care. You will hire him. You will pay him a very, very handsome salary. You will give him a fancy title and a big office. But he will be an employee. You will be the owner." And the funny thing, when I presented it to Barry, he didn't even blink. He was so excited to be president and CEO. He was so thrilled with the idea of a title, of a budget, of being the face of the company, that he signed the employment agreement without a second glance. He just saw the dotted line. He didn't read the fine print. That was 30 years ago. For 3 decades, I was the head of research, a title that, to the outside world, sounded like just another department head. I took a salary just like him, but I was the one who signed off on the budgets. I was the one who quietly reviewed every patent renewal, my name listed as the sole inventor. And Barry became a star. He was the toast of Boston. He was Barry Manning, the visionary. He'd told the story of my company so many times at so many dinners in so many interviews. that he'd come to believe it himself. He truly believed it was all his. He forgot he was just a salaried employee. I never forgot. For years, I let him have the stage. It was easier. I had my work. I had my son, Peter. I didn't need the applause. Until about a year ago. Until I started seeing the private meetings with Lena Reed. Until I saw the new bank accounts I wasn't supposed to know about. Until I realized he wasn't just taking the credit. He was now planning to take the assets. So, as I sat there that morning on my 70th birthday, I did my work. I reviewed the final data. And then I made one last quiet call to my lawyer. Everything was in place. Barry thought he was the master of the universe. He thought he was a king bequeathing his kingdom. He never understood. He was just a tenant. And his lease, as of that night, had just expired. He had spent 45 years building his life on my foundation, and he never once bothered to read the deed. He had no idea he was living in my house. He just stood there, staring into that plain white box. The silence in the room was heavy, thick, like you could have cut it with a knife. All the air, all the laughter and chatter from my 70th birthday party had just been sucked out of the room. Barry's mouth was slightly open, but no sound was coming out. He looked up from the box to my face, his eyes wide and blank. In that one single instant, he wasn't the powerful CEO. He wasn't the charismatic man of the hour. He was just a very confused, very frightened old man. I know what everyone in that room was expecting. They were waiting for me to scream, to throw a drink, to finally, after 45 years of being the quiet, supportive wife, have a public meltdown. They were waiting for the drama, for the tears, for the scene. But I didn't feel any of that. What I felt was a click. It was a strange feeling. Not a shatter, not a break. It was a cold, clean click, like the sound of a heavy steel bank vault door finally, satisfyingly, swinging shut and locking into place. It was the sound of finished. You see, I hadn't just found out. This wasn't a sudden, jealous reaction. I had known for a full year. I'd known ever since I'd stumbled across the first email. An email that I wasn't supposed to see between him and Dr. Lena Reed. It wasn't a love letter. No, that would have been simpler. It was worse. It was a business plan. It was a detailed step-by-step plan to create a new shell corporation, and he was using my company's resources to do it. So, I'd spent the last 12 months not grieving my marriage that had been a hollow shell for decades, but fighting for my life's work. I'd spent a year quietly gathering paperwork, talking to my lawyer, and getting every single one of my ducks in a row. What Barry did tonight, standing me up there like his prize poodle while he announced he was giving my company to her, it wasn't a shock. It was just the final, arrogant, selfish move that gave me the moral permission to do what I had legally been ready to do for 6 months. The click I felt was the sound of the tumblers falling into place. Barry fumbled with the lid of the box, slamming it shut as if he could unsee what was inside. He looked at the crowd, who were all just staring, frozen in place. He tried to laugh. It was a terrible, dry, cracking sound. Jacqueline, he said, and his voice broke right in the middle of my name. She has such a remarkable sense of humor. Always the kidder. He turned to me, and his smile was a desperate, painted-on thing. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were full of panic. Darling, what is this little joke? I didn't smile back. It's no joke, Barry, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. Dr. Lena Reed, the ambitious new CEO, took a small, instinctive step backward. Her face was pale. She was a smart woman, I'd give her that. She was realizing in that instant that whatever was happening, this was not part of her plan. She looked from me to Barry, and then back to me, her eyes darting like a calculator trying to find a new, sudden answer. The guests, our friends of 40 years, started to murmur. They knew a performance had just ended, and the real show was about to begin. So, let me tell you what was in that box. The gift I'd prepared so carefully. It was very simple. Just two things, resting on a bed of plain, white satin. The first thing was a key card. Just a simple, white plastic employee ID card. It had his picture on it, and his name, Barry Manning, CEO. It looked exactly like the one that was in his expensive leather wallet, except this one was just a piece of plastic. As of 1 p.m., the exact moment he tapped his glass to start his speech, I'd had his access personally deactivated from my home computer. His key would no longer open the parking garage. It wouldn't call the private elevator. It wouldn't even open the front door of the building. The second thing in the box was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in 3. It was on heavy, cream-colored bond. Our company letterhead, the official letterhead of Manning Medical. The letterhead that had my name, not his, in the fine print at the bottom as the founder. It wasn't a birthday card. It wasn't a sentimental note. And it wasn't divorce papers. That was a personal mess for another day. This was business. It was a formal notice of termination of his employment, effective immediately, for cause. That was the part that made his hands tremble. For cause. Those two little words were everything. They meant no golden parachute, no severance package, no stock options to cash out, no consulting fees, no pension. It cited, in very clear legal terms, gross mismanagement of company assets and actions constituting a direct conflict of interest. All the things I had spent a year quietly documenting. And at the very bottom, there was the signature. It didn't say, your wife. It didn't say, Jacqueline. It said, in clear black ink, Jacqueline Manning, sole proprietor and founder, Manning Medical. I think that was the line that finally made all the blood drain from his face. The line he hadn't seen or thought about in 30 years. The line my father had insisted on. He looked at that paper, then back at me. His face was a wreck of disbelief. And for the first time in our 45-year marriage, I saw real fear in his eyes. He finally understood. He wasn't the king bequeathing his kingdom. He was just an employee I had just fired. The party, as you can imagine, ended quickly, not with a bang, but with a quiet, fast, shuffling exit. Guests grabbed their coats, suddenly avoiding our eyes, murmuring about getting the car or an early morning. Dr. Lena Reed was one of the first ones out the door, a flash of black disappearing down the hall before Barry even looked up from the box again. Within 10 minutes, the room was empty. Just me, Barry, and my son, Peter, who had come to stand quietly by my side. Barry sank onto one of the expensive velvet sofas. He just stared at the box in his hands. Jacqueline, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You can't do this. I looked at him, this stranger who had taken credit for my life for nearly half a century. I just did. I said, I turned to Peter. Would you help me clear these glasses, darling? The morning after my 70th birthday was cold and clear. The penthouse, which had been so full of noise and perfume the night before, was silent. Barry was gone. I don't know where he went, and frankly, I didn't care. At 10 a.m. sharp, my son Peter and I walked into my lawyer's office in the financial district. My lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, isn't a flashy man. He's the son of the man my father first took me to see all those decades ago. He's meticulous, quiet, and he doesn't waste words. His conference room overlooks the harbor, and it's always kept at a precise chilly temperature. We sat at his long, polished table. Peter sat next to me, his hand resting on his briefcase. He hadn't said much since last night, but his presence was solid. He was my rock. Mr. Caldwell nodded to us. Jacqueline, Peter. Well, last night was eventful. I hear. You could say that, I said. Is everything ready? He didn't answer right away. He just slid a thick, blue file across the table toward me. This is what you've been waiting for, he said. Peter's final audit came in this morning. We have the complete picture. Now, I know what you all are probably thinking. You're thinking this was all about a marriage. You're thinking this was about him standing up there with that woman, Dr. Reed. You're thinking he got fired because he humiliated me or because he was having an affair. That's what Barry thought, too. He thought he was being punished for his ego. He was wrong. What happened last night, that wasn't about our marriage. Our marriage had been an empty room with nice furniture for at least 20 years. This was about something much, much darker. This was about theft. I opened the blue file. Peter had already walked me through most of it over the last few months, but seeing it all laid out in black and white, it still makes you catch your breath. For the last 2 years, Barry and Dr. Lena Reed hadn't just been having strategy meetings. They had been systematically building a new company, a shell corporation registered in Delaware, with a very slick website and a fancy, meaningless name, Legacy Innovations. Mr. Caldwell pointed to a document, a flow chart. Here's the problem, Jacqueline, he said, his voice level. He wasn't just starting a side business. He was planning to steal yours right from under you. You see, for 2 years, Barry had been using his power as CEO to do one quiet, evil thing. He was laying the groundwork to declare my foundational patents obsolete. My life's work. The algorithm I built in a university lab that started this entire company. The software that is still the core of every single product we sell. He had commissioned independent reviews from consulting firms that Peter discovered were run by his old college fraternity brothers. He had Dr. Reed write a series of internal reports, all claiming that my original work was outdated, clunky, and no longer competitive in the modern market. He was building a paper trail inside my own company with my own money to prove that the very thing that made us billions was now suddenly worthless. I could feel my hands clench. Peter put his hand over mine on the table. And here, Mr. Caldwell said, turning the page, was the final step, the one he was planning to execute next month. It was a draft of a proposal written on Manning medical letterhead, ready to be presented to the board. It was a recommendation. It recommended that the company sell off its obsolete and non-performing intellectual property to a small third-party acquisitions firm that was better positioned to manage it. That third-party firm? Legacy Innovations. His shell company. He was going to sell your life's work to himself, Mr. Caldwell said. And Peter, what was the proposed purchase price? Peter spoke for the first time, his voice cold as ice. $1. He was going to sell your entire life's work to himself for $1. But that wasn't even the end of it. The plan, which Peter had found in a deleted email draft, was this. Once Legacy Innovations owned my patents, Dr. Reed would step in as the new genius. They would relaunch my work with a new name and a new marketing campaign as a next-generation breakthrough. They would use my own foundation, my own mind, my own genius to build their brand new empire. And I would be left holding the original company, Manning Medical, which would now be nothing but an empty shell. A famous name with no product, no patents, and no future. I'd be the old woman left with the husk. I want you to stop and understand this. This wasn't just about money. I have plenty of money. This wasn't about a company. This was about erasure. He didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to replace me. He wanted to steal my identity. He had already taken the credit for my work for 45 years. But that wasn't enough for him. Now, he wanted to take the work itself. He wanted to erase my name from my own invention and put Lena Reed's in its place. He was actively trying to rewrite my history, to make it so I, Jacqueline Manning, had never mattered at all. He wanted me to be left with nothing, a forgotten old woman, a rock, a supportive wife whose obsolete work had been cleverly salvaged by her brilliant husband and his young, ambitious protege. That is the true betrayal. That is what I found out a year ago. That is what I've been fighting in secret ever since. Infidelity that hurts your heart. But this was an attempt to steal my mind, my legacy, my very existence. So when people ask me how I could be so cold, how I could fire my husband of 45 years at my own 70th birthday party in front of all our friends, I tell them this. I wasn't ending a marriage. I was stopping a robbery. I was preventing my own annihilation. He thought I was a fool. He thought I was just a quiet, supportive wife who was too old, too trusting, or too stupid to notice what he was doing in his own office. He mistook my silence for weakness. He mistook my patience for ignorance. He forgot who owned the house. I looked at Mr. Caldwell, and I felt that same cold, clean click from the night before. So, last night, I said, that was step one. What's step two? Mr. Caldwell smiled. It was a thin, sharp, legal smile. Step two is already in motion. While he was at your party giving his speech, our team was filing the injunctions. He's not just fired Jacqueline. As of this morning, he is under a temporary restraining order. He cannot enter the building. He cannot access the company's servers. He cannot contact any employees. And his corporate accounts are frozen pending your audit. He leaned forward. He is, for all intents and purposes, locked out of the very company he was trying to steal. This wasn't a divorce. This was a war. And I had just won, Mr. Caldwell, and I finalized our next steps, and Peter and I left his office. While we were in that meeting, Barry was, I assume, just beginning to understand what was happening. He had always believed that possession was everything. He went to the office every day, sat in the big corner office, and held the meetings. In his mind, that made it his. He thought last night was just me, his wife, having a hysterical fit. He thought he could go to the office on Monday, my birthday was a Sunday, and just fix it. He'd calm down the board, fire a few people for letting me have access to a lawyer, and everything would go back to normal. But I had planned this takedown for a year. And it wasn't just about one termination letter. It was about dismantling the entire machine he'd built. The first blow, as I was told later, happened at 8:45 a.m. that Monday. Barry and Dr. Lena Reed arrived at the Manning Medical Building. Not together, but at the same time. They were probably on the phone all night, strategizing. They were a team ready to take back control. Barry walked right up to the private executive turnstile, the one that led to the private elevators. He swiped his key card. Nothing. A little red light flashed. Access denied. He probably frowned, annoyed. He swiped it again, harder. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. Lena tried hers. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. George, the head of security who has been with us for 20 years, stepped out from his desk. Mr. Manning, sir, I'm afraid your card isn't working. Well, obviously, George, Barry would have snapped. Fix it and call maintenance for Dr. Reed's. This is where the plan went into motion. George looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Sir, I can't. My instructions are that you're not to be admitted to the premises. He looked over at Lena. You either, ma'am. Instructions. Barry's voice would have been rising. Instructions from who? I am the instructions. George just shook his head. From the owner, sir. From Dr. Manning. Then he slid a single sterile cardboard banker's box across the marble counter. They, asked me to give you this. It's the personal items from your desk. The humiliation. In front of the entire lobby. In front of her. Inside that box, I'm told, was his silver-framed photo of our son, Peter, a photo he used as a prop, his favorite Mont Blanc pen, and his little crystal golf paperweight. That was it. 45 years of his legacy, and it all fit in one small box. Lena, being the smarter of the two, apparently just turned around and walked straight out the door. She knew when a ship was sinking. Barry, however, was trapped. He was furious. He needed to fight back. And to fight, he needed lawyers. Expensive lawyers. So, his next move was to the bank. He didn't just go to an ATM. Barry had a private banker at a big, old Boston firm. A man he golfed with. He would have called him from the lobby, his voice shaking with rage. "John, it's Barry Manning. I need you to wire $500,000 from the corporate reserve account to my personal account. Immediately. My wife she's done something ridiculous." And then there would have been that terrible, awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Barry, I'm looking at the account right now." And Barry would have barked. "Barry, I can't," the banker would have said, his voice all professional and distant. "There's a note on the account. All corporate funds are frozen, pending a full audit." "Frozen? What do you mean frozen? I am the CEO. I'm sorry, Barry. The flag was put in place this morning by the sole proprietor, Dr. Jacqueline Manning. Your name, it's not even listed as a signatory anymore. I can't help you." That was the moment. The moment he realized the letter in the box wasn't a joke. The money was gone. Not his money, you see. It was my company's money. He just had a very, very generous allowance. He was locked out of the building. He was locked out of the bank. He had one card left to play. His influence. The board of directors. The men he had personally chosen. The old boys club he'd cultivated for decades. He would have rushed home, or to a coffee shop, I don't know, and open his laptop. He would have tried to log into his company email. Access denied. He would have tried his company phone. Deactivated. He had been digitally erased. He had no access, no power, no platform. He was just an angry man in a coffee shop with a useless laptop. And while he was desperately trying to guess his old passwords, the members of the board were already getting an email. But it wasn't from him. It was from me. I had sent it at 9 a.m. It was very simple, very professional. To the members of the board, it read, "Please be advised that as of last night, Barry Manning is no longer with Manning Medical. His employment has been terminated. I will be in contact shortly to schedule a meeting to discuss the transition, which I will be overseeing personally. In the meantime, we are conducting a full internal audit. Thank you for your discretion." I didn't accuse him. I didn't get emotional. I just stated the facts. And I included those two magic words, full audit. That's all it takes. Men like that, they're not loyal to friends. They're loyal to power and terrified of risk. The second they read audit, they knew Barry was toxic. His phone, I'm sure, went silent. No one would return his calls. He was an island. Now, you're probably wondering, how did I, a quiet researcher, pull all this off? That's where my son, Peter, comes in. Barry had always dismissed Peter. He was too quiet, too sensitive, not the aggressive son he'd wanted. Peter didn't go into business or medicine. He went into computers. He became a cybersecurity expert. Barry thought that was a weak, nerdy little job. Barry was a fool. A year ago, when I first saw those suspicious emails, I didn't go to a lawyer. I went to my son. "Peter," I said, "I think your father is stealing from me, but I can't prove it." Peter just nodded. "I'll look into it, Mom." As the owner of the company, I had every legal right to audit my own servers. Peter just facilitated it, quietly, from his own home. And what he found was everything. Barry and Lena had been sloppy, arrogant. They thought they were the smartest people in the room. They didn't think anyone was watching. Peter didn't just find the emails. He found the drafts of emails. He found the deleted files. He found the wire transfer requests to their shell corporation. He found the secret contracts, the timelines, the fraudulent consulting invoices they were using to siphon money. For 6 months, Peter had quietly built a fortress of digital evidence. He had every document, every date, every dollar. He was my spy, my auditor, and my confirmation. While Barry was busy building his fake legacy and underestimating his quiet wife, he was also underestimating his quiet son. That was his real fatal mistake. He thought he was the only one in the family who knew how to fight. For 2 days, there was just silence, a deep, ringing silence in the penthouse. I knew it wouldn't last. I knew his panic and his ego wouldn't let him stay hidden for long. He was a cornered animal, and a cornered animal is always the most dangerous. He couldn't find me at home. I wasn't answering my personal cell phone. He couldn't get into the office. I had, in effect, vanished from his world while I held all the strings. On Wednesday afternoon, they found me. I wasn't at the penthouse. I wasn't at my lawyer's office. I was at my real sanctuary, my haven, the Boston Athenaeum. It's one of the oldest private libraries in the country, a quiet, beautiful old building on Beacon Street that smells like old books and floor wax. It's where I go when I need to do my real work, my research, surrounded by silence and history. I was on the 5th floor in a small alcove with a window overlooking the granary burying ground, buried deep in a stack of scientific journals. I heard the elevator doors open, and then I heard them. Their voices were sharp, frantic, and they were breaking every rule of library quiet. "Jacqueline, I know you're in here." Barry's voice. It wasn't the smooth, charming voice he used at parties. It was a raw, ugly bark. An elderly librarian tried to stop him. "Sir, you cannot. This is a member's library." "She's my wife, Jacqueline." And then they were there, standing in front of my little wooden desk. Barry and Dr. Lena Reed. They looked awful. Just awful. Barry's silver hair was messy, uncombed. He was wearing the same expensive suit pants from Monday, but they were rumpled, and he had a wrinkled polo shirt on. His eyes were bloodshot and wide with panic. The charm was gone. Completely. This was the man behind the mask. Dr. Reed looked just as bad. Her sharp, ambitious energy was gone, replaced by a pale, thin-lipped anger. She looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. "Jacqueline," Barry panted, leaning on my desk with both hands. "You have to stop this. You have to call them, right now." I didn't say anything. I just slowly put a bookmark in my journal and looked up at him. I folded my hands on the desk. "Did you hear me?" he demanded. "This is insane. You've lost your mind. 45 years, Jacqueline. 45 years of our life together. And you throw it all away? You're destroying everything we built. Everything I built." I just stared at him. He tried a different tactic. The victim. This isn't you, Jacqueline. "I know it's not. It's these lawyers. It's Caldwell. He's manipulating you. Can't you see that? He's trying to steal the company. He's poisoning you against me." He was practically pleading, but it was still all about him. "Think about Peter," he said, his voice cracking. "You're destroying our son's inheritance. You're burning the whole thing to the ground out of, what? Spite. Because I hurt your feelings? You're going to leave our son with nothing." That was a mistake. Mentioning Peter, my son, who had been the one to uncover his entire ugly plan. I still said nothing. My silence was making him crazy. It was a wall he couldn't break through. Then Lena Reed stepped forward. She thought she could handle me where he had failed. She tried to sound reasonable, like she was the adult in the room. "Dr. Manning," she said, her voice low and quick. "Jacqueline, let's be serious. You are a legend. Your work, it's foundational. Do you really want this to be your legacy? This messy, ugly public fight. It's not a good look." She was trying to appeal to my vanity, my legacy. "Barry was just trying to secure your future," she went on, her voice so sincere it was insulting. "He was trying to protect the company. The old patents, they're valuable, but they needed a modern framework. That's all we were doing. We were trying to help you, to secure your retirement." She was trying to sell me the same lie they had built their plan on, that I was old, obsolete, and needed their help. "You're an icon," she said, trying to smile. "Don't tarnish that. Call off the lawyers. Let's all sit down in a boardroom, and we can find a solution that works for everyone, that protects your legacy." I listened to them both. I let them pour all their panic and all their lies onto my quiet desk. I let them finish. The old librarian was hovering nearby, holding a telephone, ready to call security. When they were finally done, just breathing hard in the silence of that beautiful room, I looked at Lena. Then I looked at Barry. I looked at this man I had lived with for 45 years. This man who had called me his rock while he was drilling into my foundation. This man who had just accused me of destroying our son's inheritance when he was the one who had tried to steal it. I leaned forward just a few inches. I didn't raise my voice. I asked him a very simple, very quiet question. "Was it your idea, Barry, or hers?" I paused, just for a second, to name the Shell Corporation Legacy Innovations. His face. It was a sight I will never forget. All the anger, all the fake pleading, all the panic, it all just vanished. It was replaced by the most profound, bone-deep animal fear I have ever seen in a human being. His mouth fell open. His face went chalk white. He instinctively, physically recoiled from the desk, like I had splashed acid on him. He didn't have to say a word. I had just told him. I hadn't just found a few suspicious emails. I hadn't just locked him out of his office. I had just told him, with that one simple question, that I knew everything. I knew the name of the Shell company. I knew about the plan. I knew about the fraud. I knew about the theft. I had the receipts. Lena Reed her face crumpled. She put a hand to her mouth. She knew in that instant that it wasn't just over. It was legally over. This wasn't a marriage dispute. This was a criminal case. "Get out," I said. It was the only other thing I said. The librarian was already walking over, and this time she had 2 security guards with her. They didn't say another word. They just turned and they walked out, a security guard on either side of them. I watched them go. Then I picked up my journal, found my place again, and went back to my work. After the confrontation at the library, I knew I had broken them on a personal level. But that wasn't enough. Barry hadn't just tried to hurt me. He had tried to defraud the company. He had put our investors, our employees, and my entire life's work at risk. This couldn't just be a private family matter. This had to be a public corporate execution. My lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, agreed. We set a meeting for the following Monday, an emergency meeting of our top shareholders and investors. The stakeholders, as Barry loved to call them. These were the powerful men and women of Boston, the venture capitalists and old money families who had backed Manning Medical, believing they were backing Barry. They were his audience, his fan club, and in his mind, his true peers. Mr. Caldwell sent out the invitation. It was simple. He said that Dr. Jacqueline Manning, the founder and sole proprietor, had concluded her internal audit and would be presenting her findings. He also, very formally, invited Barry Manning and Dr. Lena Reed to attend to provide their own context and answer any questions the board and investors may have. This was the trap. He was giving them just enough rope. He was appealing to their ego. He was giving them a stage, and he knew they were arrogant enough to take it. They would see this as their one last chance to paint me as a bitter, hysterical, senile woman. They thought they could walk into that room, charm the investors they golfed with for 20 years, and wrest back control. The meeting was held in the main boardroom on the top floor, the one with the 30-foot long mahogany table and the sweeping views of the harbor. It was a room I had always hated. It was Barry's throne room. I walked in at 10 a.m. sharp with Peter on one side and Mr. Caldwell on the other. The investors were already there, about a dozen of them looking tense and unhappy. They hated this kind of drama. At 10:02, Barry and Lena walked in. Barry had tried to pull himself together. He was wearing his best power suit, but his face was pale and his hands were unsteady. Lena walked beside him, her face a hard, angry mask. They sat at the opposite end of the table, as if this was a negotiation. The lead shareholder, a man named Thomas Vance, cleared his throat. He was an old, powerful man who had been with us from the beginning. Jacqueline, Barry, this is irregular. We are all very concerned. Barry, you've been a friend for a long time. We've heard some very disturbing things. That you're locked out. That Jacqueline has. Barry put up a hand, trying to reclaim his old charm. Thomas, thank you. And I'm glad you're all here. Because what's happening is, it's a tragedy. A complete misunderstanding being fueled by an emotional overreaction. He looked at me with such fake, practiced pity. My wife, Jacqueline, is not herself. She hasn't been for some time. She's being manipulated by her lawyers. She's making erratic, damaging decisions that are putting this entire company at risk. Lena chimed in, her voice sharp. What Mr. Manning means is that Dr. Manning's personal feelings are clouding her ability to see the strategic vision we've been implementing. She's trying to burn the house down because she thinks she's been slighted. There it was. The senile, emotional woman card. They were telling a room full of powerful men that I was crazy, that I was a wife, not an owner. The investors shifted in their seats. This was what they were afraid of, a messy, emotional divorce spilling into their portfolios. They all turned to look at me. This was my moment to cry, to yell, to defend myself. I stood up. The room went silent. I looked at Barry. I looked at Lena. Then I looked at Thomas Vance. Thank you, Barry and Dr. Reed, for that context, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and cold. I understand your concern, but this is not a personal matter. This is a financial one. As I mentioned in my email, I have completed a full audit. Before I say another word, my son, Peter, who led the technical side of the audit, and our corporate counsel, Mr. Caldwell, have a brief presentation. I sat down. Barry looked confused. This wasn't on his script. A large screen descended from the ceiling, and the lights in the room dimmed slightly. Peter stood up. He wasn't the sensitive, quiet son Barry remembered. He was a cold, efficient expert. He just held a small remote. Good morning, Peter said. We have 3 slides for you today. Click. The first slide lit up the room. It was a scanned document, a legal filing from 1995. It was the original core patent for the diagnostic algorithm. It was the entire foundation of the company. And at the bottom, in the box marked inventor, was one name, Dr. Jacqueline Manning. In the box marked owner was one name, Jacqueline Manning, sole proprietor. This is the 1995 founding patent. Peter said, the asset upon which this entire company is built. I heard a few of the investors murmur. They had all been told by Barry that he was the inventor. But as Dr. Reed said, Peter continued, his voice emotionless. That's old work. Let's look at the new work. Click. The second slide. It was a screenshot of an email from Barry's computer to Lena Reed's, dated 6 months ago. I knew this email. It was the one that had started it all. The investors leaned forward, reading the text on the screen. It said, she'll never know. She doesn't read the financials anyway. The old work is the key. We just repackage it under your name, file it through the new entity, and by the time she realizes it, we'll be the ones holding all the cards. She's just a rock. She's not the architect. A sound, a sharp, collective intake of breath in the room. Thomas Vance. His face went from concerned to furious in a single second. This wasn't a personal feeling. This was intent. This was fraud. Barry stood up. This is taken out of context. This is a fabrication. Please sit down, Mr. Manning, Mr. Caldwell said, his voice like ice. We have one more slide. Barry's face was ashen. Lena looked like she was going to be physically ill. Peter clicked the remote one last time. Click. The third slide. It was a simple flowchart. 2 boxes connected by an arrow. The first box said, Manning Medical Corporate Account. The second box said, Legacy Innovations, LLC Delaware. The arrow was a series of wire transfers. Over $2 million siphoned over the last 18 months. Consulting fees, research grants, market analysis, all paid from their company to his shell company. The name, Legacy Innovations. The same name I had used in the library. There was a full 5 seconds of absolute dead, ringing silence. The only sound was the hum of the projector. The lights came up. Barry was a ghost. He was gone. He sagged back into his chair, his mouth open. Thomas Vance, the lead investor, didn't even look at him. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just looked at Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, Thomas said, his voice shaking with cold, controlled rage. What are the next steps to claw back these consulting fees? Another investor spoke up. This is gross criminal liability. He has exposed all of us. We need to contact the SEC, said another, and the state's attorney. They weren't talking about Barry as a person anymore. He wasn't their friend. He was a liability. He was a legal problem that needed to be contained. In the space of 3 slides, he had been completely and totally erased. He had built his entire identity on being the visionary, the businessman. And in 5 minutes, my son and my lawyer had shown them that he was quite simply a common thief. They didn't look at him again. Not once. They all just looked at me. Jacqueline, Thomas Vance said, his voice now respectful. What is your plan to secure the assets and move the company forward? I looked just once at the man I had been married to for 45 years. He was just a shell. Empty. Mr. Caldwell, I said, please begin. It's been 6 months since that day in the boardroom. I'm speaking to you now from my office. It's the same corner office on the top floor that Barry used to call his throne room. But you wouldn't recognize it. I had everything ripped out. The dark, heavy mahogany panels are gone. The massive, intimidating desk is gone. The heavy leather chairs are gone. Now, the walls are a soft, warm white. The floors are light oak. One entire wall is just glass looking out over the Boston Harbor, and another is a living wall filled with ferns and orchids and green, growing things. My desk is a simple, long table made of reclaimed wood, and it's usually covered in my research papers, not shareholder reports. The room is filled with light and air. It's a place where you can finally breathe. A lot has changed in 6 months. Manning Medical doesn't exist anymore. I rebranded. The company is now called Manning Research. It's what it always should have been. We're a research-first company, not a marketing one. And I am, for the first time in my life, officially the CEO. It's funny. Last week, a young woman from Forbes magazine came to interview me. The issue is sitting on my desk right now. There's a picture of me right here on the cover. Not in a stuffy suit, but in my lab coat. The headline doesn't say Barry Manning's wife. It just says Jacqueline Manning, the 70-year-old genius who took back her legacy. My son, Peter, is my chief operating officer. He runs the business side of things, and he is brilliant at it. He was the one who was underestimated his whole life, just like I was. Now, we run this place together. He's my partner, in a way his father never was. The first thing I did as CEO was start a mentorship program, a scholarship fund for young women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I meet with them every month. I see that same fire in their eyes that I had all those years ago in the lab. And I make them a promise. You will do the work and your name will be on the door. No one will ever call you a rock while they take credit for your building. As for Barry and Dr. Reed, their story is a sad, predictable one. The investors, led by Thomas Vance, were furious about the fraud. They are pursuing legal action. A lot of legal action. They are tied up in lawsuits and depositions. Barry lost everything. Not just the company, but his reputation, which I learned was the only thing he ever truly cared about. I hear he's living in a small, rented condo somewhere south of the city. He's irrelevant. They both are. They are characters from a book I finished reading a long time ago. I don't feel anger. I don't feel hate. I just don't feel anything about them at all. I'm too busy. I was thinking about that word Barry always used. Foundation. For 45 years, I believed that was my job. To be the silent, unseen foundation. The rock. The thing that held everyone else up. I thought my purpose was to be the strong, stable ground so he could build his life, his legacy, his company on top of me. I was wrong. I finally realized I am the foundation, but I'm also the architect. I'm the designer. I'm the one who drew the plans and did the work. I am the whole entire building. I just had to finally evict a tenant who had stopped paying rent and was trying to burn the place down. Now, at 70 years old, my life, my real life, has just begun. I'm not just a wife. I'm not just a mother. I am Dr. Jacqueline Manning, and I have so much more work to do. Thank you for listening to my story. I wanted to share it because I just know, I'm not the only one. So I want to ask you all, and please tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like your work, your contributions, your very life was being claimed by someone else? Have you ever been the rock for someone who didn't deserve your support? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? And most importantly, what is one thing you have always dreamed of doing just for yourself that you can finally start today? It's never, ever too late to build your own house. If this story touched you, please give it a like so I know I'm not alone. And please share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to take back your own name. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories. And if you'd like, there's another story waiting for you right here. Thank you for being here with me.